When I was in my 20s, I was on track to be able to retire in my early 30s. So why did I quit the FIRE movement, the financially independent retire early? And I was doing this before there was even a name and certainly before there was a movement. Why did I take myself off of that path? Let's jump in and talk about it. I've been a financial advisor for over 20 years, and oftentimes I have to encourage people to save more money. Why did I start saving less money? And let's talk about the main reasons. The first one was, in many ways, I felt like I was at risk of trading the joy of my youth years, my young years. I was basically trading that in order to be able to retire early. But I should share that when I was 20 years old, I had my first financial plan done by a fee-only financial advisor, so somebody that was a fiduciary to me. And we came up with a game plan for me to be able to retire by 35. And 2 years in 24 months, I had hit the goal I had hit my 60-month goal, my 5-year goal. And so why did I give that up? I mean, I was literally, 8 years away, 7 years away from being able to retire and retire at 30. Well, there's a couple reasons. Again, I talked about exchanging my youth for early retirement, which the more I looked at it, the more I experienced it, the more I said, you know what, that's not a good trade-off. I want both. I want not just to be able to retire and be financially independent. I like that part of it, but I didn't want to have to trade away my youth. I mean, I was pretty frugal, right? I was when I first graduated college, so I had a good job. I was fortunate. I had a good paying job. And rather than get my own apartment, I actually found somebody that was looking for a roommate with their 2-bedroom apartment. And I became their roommate. And I did very little eating out. And I kept my college car, which was okay. But I just felt like I was sacrificing too much. And then I met the woman of my dreams, my current wife, my wife, I should say, Linda. We were spending time together, and she was on board with this frugality, but not at the level that I was. And then she went to business school. She decided to go get her MBA. And I got introduced to a whole new crowd of people that were reinvesting in their lives, taking 2 years off of work to go to business school, spending a fair amount of money to get their MBA. And I just saw people really investing in their future as opposed to trying to get to the finish line as soon as possible. And that really caused me to think, part of the reason that I was in a rush to be financially independent, yes, I wanted the financial security, but it was also because my undergrad was in engineering. It was not my life's work. I knew that's not how I wanted to spend the rest of my life. So by seeing my wife's experience and her classmates and how they were reinvesting in themselves and retooling so that they could do a career that they were excited about and they loved, that opened my eyes and said, oftentimes the best answer is not option A or option B, but it's both. It's a blend of both. And that opened my eyes and said, let's see if we can do this with my life. So instead of focusing on saving all of that money, I decided to slow the flow. And people have a term for that now. They call it slow FIRE. So it's the FIRE movement, the financial independent retire early. And if you've never heard of it, it's interesting to Google it. There's a whole movement, a whole group of young people that are trying to become financially independent as soon as they can. And so I agree with the concept of becoming financially independent. In fact, one of my heroes is a guy by the name of Reid Hoffman, who is the founder of LinkedIn. And he has a famous quote where he talks about, his quest to become financially independent as soon as he could be. Not that he wanted to never work again, but he didn't want to ever have to work for a paycheck again. Reid would say that for him, working for a salary was bad motivation for him. And I think there's a lot of truth for all of us, right? We want to do work that we find meaningful, that gives us purpose, where we don't need the salary. The salary is nice, it's important, but we can live without the salary. And I think we've all had experiences in our life where at some point something happens at work. Maybe we're mistreated. The company does something that we're not comfortable with. And boy, you know, it's a lot easier to do the right thing, to stick up for yourself, to let your boss know, hey, you can't treat me this way. You know, if I'm going to work here, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to treat you with respect, and I need you to do the same for me. Or if your company is cutting corners and doing something you're uncomfortable with, just being able to say, you know what, I'm not going to play this game. I don't want to help this company reach their goals because I don't like how they do business. And having the freedom to do that. And, you know, most of us don't have that flexibility. We have mortgages that we have to pay. We have retirement that we're saving for, and saving for our kids' college education, if that's something that's on your plate. And so it may be part of a long-term plan, right? We might say, okay, I've seen some things at work that this company is not my company, and I'm going to start the process of looking for something else. But that can be a year journey, a year and a half journey. And now we've just doubled our workload. So I think slowing the flow makes a lot of sense. I think building towards financial independence, or at least, you hear me talk about this a lot on my channel, having a really comfortable and solid foundation with your emergency fund. So an emergency fund, I typically tell people at least 3 months worth of living expenses. Where if something happened to your job, you'd have 3 months where you have all your bills paid for. Or if you broke your arm and you had to go to the hospital, right? Most people, unfortunately, over half of all Americans, if they had a $1,000 unexpected medical bill, they couldn't pay for it out of their savings. They would have to put it on their credit card. And now they're paying 20, 25, 30% interest on that money. So having an emergency fund is important. And so having a healthy foundation of an emergency fund, maybe 6 months to 12 months. And actually, the older you get, the more important having a larger emergency fund is. Larger by number of months. It's also going to be dollars, but just because your emergency fund is double in dollars what it was in your 20s and 30s, maybe your expenses have doubled, so you still just have 3 months, right? So I want you to, as we get older, certainly as we approach our late 40s and 50s, it can be a lot harder to find another job at the level that we're at. Yes, we have high skills, but we're also expensive employees. And there's been multiple studies that have been shown, you know, people that are making $100,000 plus, people that are at the higher end of the wages in their company, it can take them 6 months or a year to find another comparable job. So having that emergency fund. So again, it's not all or nothing, right? It's not A or B, but it's both. And maybe both first is the first baby step, to use a Dave Ramsey term. The first step is to get a really solid, healthy emergency fund. So we ease off the gas on that frugality a little bit. And we enjoy the journey a little bit more while still being conscious that let's build up that emergency fund. Let's build up that base. You've heard me talk many times that the secret to retiring with $1 million, which is something that fewer than 10% of all Americans will do, the secret to retiring with $1 million or more is getting to that first $250,000. And the reason that's so important is at that point, your money is working harder for you than you are. At that point, the growth on that $250,000 is more than most people can put into the account. So I call that the power curve. So getting to the power curve as soon as possible is important. Okay, so we talked about the emergency fund. We talked about the importance of having this freedom and flexibility. We talked about enjoying the journey. These are all things that, you know, here I am in my late 50s. Obviously, I didn't retire in my early 30s. Do I have any regrets? Do I wish I had been able to retire in my early 30s? And the answer to that is a resounding no. I'm really glad, like my wife, what I did was I ended up going back to business school myself and then became a financial advisor. And that's what I've been doing for the past 20 years. And that's what I think we all want to be able to do, is enjoy the journey as much as we can and get both. And that's the key. I want to enjoy the journey. I want to find my life's work. And I want to make sure that I don't wait too long to retire. Now, before we leave, I want to share an important thing, which is part of the FIRE movement is almost this scarcity mindset, right? There's not enough money to go around, so we have to save what we can. It's a scarcity mindset, and I share this because I grew up in a low-income family, and it's something that I'm going to struggle with my whole life just because of my upbringing. I do have a scarcity mindset, but it's much calmer now than it was in my 20s. So to the extent we can look at it as we have this abundance, and if you can get to that first $250,000 and get your money working for you, and you see your accounts on average, not every year, but on average, increasing at a rate faster than you can put money in, it makes it easier to have this abundance mindset. Now, we have to balance the okay, we found our life's work, we're enjoying our work, but we also have to balance being thoughtful and deliberate about whether and when we retire. Hopefully not whether, but when we retire. The default, the automatic pace in the United States is we retire at 65. But if you can retire sooner, if you're in your 50s and you can retire at 50 or 55, very few people that I know, and I've been a financial advisor now for over 20 years, very few people that I know that have done that have regretted it. And that's what this video up here is all about. 5 reasons to retire as soon as you can. I'll see you in there. Bye-bye.